Today we'll be discussing our favorite entertainment that we consumed in 2024. This is Doctor versus Comedian. I'm Dr. Asadoja, and this is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not a real doctor.
Ali Hassan. Every episode I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment, and I question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic from medicine and health and grills me on that topic. But that's what we usually do. Today is a special episode. It is our traditional year-end best of episode. So we won't be having a medical topic today. Instead, we'll be discussing our favorite movies, television, books, and music we consumed in 2024. Now, a few caveats here. This is our favorites we consumed in 2024. A lot of them will be from this past year, but not all of them, as we will see when we get into our lists. The other thing, Ali, I've been, taking a retrospective of the year, but also going back and listening to some of our old podcasts. And, I was pretty monotone when I would say the introduction. Today, Ali and I will be discussing. Pretty monotone. I've
Should I have told you that?
You did.
Should I have let you know?
No,
I
did
tell
you
that.
did.
Okay, well,
Should you have told me earlier than when you did? I don't know.
Should you have heeded my advice when I gave it to you?
People could probably listen back to the archives and see exactly when he told me that advice. But yeah, anyway, so New Year's resolution, be more animated with that intro. How about that?
Great!
Okay, so we're going to go through these. I think the way we're going to do it is we're going to talk about movies, television. We each have some of that. We'll talk a bit about books. Again, my reading of books is not quite what Ollie's is. And then I will talk about some music from this past year, but I don't think Ollie will.
I've got no music. I will mention just a couple of comedy specials worth checking out.
Okay, let's start off with movies. Why don't you go first, Ollie? We won't go back and forth. You just give your movies list, and then I will give
Sure. Mine. I'll do that. I will say this is also one of those things where you go, what the hell have I done with my year? Like you look at your year. And this year, it wasn't that I didn't watch movies. I actually did, but I watched a lot of bad movies. Because you look at here's what I do. I don't know if you approach it this way. I look at all the movies from 2024, and which are the ones that I still remember, stayed with me, had some impact on me, and there were a few that definitely, or something in the space of entertainment. It did something to entertain me in a significant way. But then I saw a lot that I was like, no, waste of time, hated it. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, some years are like that, I guess. So first two that I'm going to mention are two that we've discussed at length on this show. And one is Saturday Night. I actually went back and watched more of it after we talked. I watched again about another half an hour or so. I really feel like in the spirit of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, it's a choreographing masterpiece, like where one person has to be standing, the other person, and then moving, and then twirling, and then saying and speak. And then it is not to be underestimated how much work Jason Reitman would have done on this to get everybody in their exact places, the right movement, the right lines. And, everyone has to be lit in a certain way. And it's behind the scenes, right? Like it's a wild undertaking. And I felt like he deserves even more credit than I gave him when we did the episode. I really thought Saturday Night deserves to be watched, especially if you're an SNL fan at any level. You don't have to go back to the beginning, but I think it's very interesting. And of course, Asif, you and I talked about the acting performances. Really, really something special. There's so many standouts in that cast. So Saturday Night, I think, is one I'll mention again. And the other one was Jim Henson Idea Man. Is it a movie? Not exactly. It's a 2-part documentary. But again, it really stuck with me. And I also mention it because I, again, was reminded of it by Saturday Night. I had completely forgotten that part about the Muppets being part of SNL and the writers being very I won't write for felt was the famous line. And Jim Henson, who is by all accounts, a certifiable genius, still being misunderstood by other comedians. And you almost feel so good and proud of him that he was with resistance from these, felt haters and puppet haters, and this, he was still able to create something so incredible. And you think about all the guests that they had and the incredible talent that would come out and say, yeah, I'll lend my time to talking to a Muppet or a puppet.
Yeah.
He wouldn't call them puppets. Actually, I'm making the cardinal mistake there. So I think those two, if you haven't watched them, you have some time over the holidays. I think both are fantastic. I think Jim Henson, Idea Man, also something you could watch with kids. You got to force. There's about 20 minutes there where even I was like, what's going on here with all this light stuff when he's first discussing how he got into it. But that's all about process as well, which I thought is it. So the next two are more sort of in the comedy vein. And I don't know if everybody will agree on this. So number one in the comedy world of movies is Ricky Stenicki.
That's so funny. I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not on your list, but you saw it.
It's you didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know things. I'll tell you what, and this was on our list from last year. We talked about this wrestling movie that Zac Efron was in.
Yeah, Iron Claw.
Iron Claw. And I've just sort of like fell in love with this dude. I always like Zac Efron. He has a special called Down to Earth. So you get to see a little bit of like not acting Zac Efron. And I like that part of him. And then what he did in Iron Claw, I mean, I really feel like he was robbed in the awards. I thought it was absolutely incredible performance. So now this is completely different, right? This is another world altogether. This is maybe back to his comedy roots, you could say. But it's just like goofiness and hijinks. And I think John Cena, as a wrestler, I think you are trained to commit 150% of yourself into any role. It is full commitment. When they're on being interviewed and they're talking about how they're going to rip somebody's throat out. And I mean,
you have to commit, because if you get a hint of eye rolling or, you think the material's beneath you, it's professional wrestling. So, you can easily think that you're done and you cannot do that, right? You have to be completely buying into what you're doing, which is what he does.
Sure. And folks, by the way, we have an expert speaking right now on wrestling. That's Asif Doja. Yeah.
Ali, you want to just tell people a bit of the plot of Ricky Stenicki? It's pretty funny.
Yes, so you have these three friends, Jermaine Fowler, Andrew Santino, who's a terrific comedian, and Zac Efron, grew up, they're childhood friends, and they grew up every time something went wrong, they would blame this fictitious Ricky Stenicki. Then they get married, and they continue to have Ricky Stenicki as their alibi. It's not a real person, but he's everything immature or, borderline criminal or suspicious that happens. Ricky Stenicki is the alibi. And then at one point, one of the wives is like, we have to meet him. How come we've never met him? And I guess it's getting suspicious. And so they have to create a real Ricky Stenicki. Enter stage left John Cena, who I'm a fan, man. I'm just really a fan. I know there's people who will be like, what do you, but you should, the screenplay also is Peter Farrelly. All in all, I thought it was a great job. I thought it was quite entertaining. Yeah.
Can I mention something about this movie? I thought it was funny. Honestly, this is true story what happened. So I watched it on the plane. I watched another movie on my list on the same plane ride. And because I had to go to Africa, as people might recall, twice this year. So those are quite long plane rides.
Yeah.
So I watched some movies on this. So Ricky Stenicki, I watched it and I liked most of it. Probably like 3/4 of it at the end. I'm like, they just could have gone out more. Like it should have been more like, and I was like, oh, it should be more like if there's something about Mary, like totally out there. We talked in a previous episode how much I liked that movie. And then I'm like, yeah, it should have been made like the Farrelly brothers. And then I realized it was Peter Farrelly who wrote and directed it.
Without his brother, he only works 3/4 for you, right? You don't like him 100%.
Maybe that's it. Anyway, that was my thoughts on it. But sorry, I interrupted your...
No, anyway, I don't even know how to end this other than to say, I think you should watch it, understand it's goofy, but I really thought it was still well done as far as a silly movie goes. Another one that I really liked, I only watched it recently. It was in, early December. I watched Fall Guy. I'm a big fan of Ryan Gosling. This is another guy who really commits so much of himself. He makes ridiculous characters look so believable. He got an incredible range. And this, again, is a very silly movie. All-star cast, great cast of people on it. And again, it's like, man, you're not just filming straight on, you're filming behind the scenes because he's a stuntman. So it's just... the logistics of putting this all together, I thought the movie from that perspective was great. I think they have a good chemistry, Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. In fact, I know they do. I'm not alone in that. And then I really love Ryan Gosling. And you want to watch something with kids over the holidays. I think if you haven't watched this already, Fall Guys good.
It's on my list. I was going to ask you, is it appropriate to watch with kids? Anything inappropriate in it? Or
Listen, I'm not the right guy to ask about that because we have shown so much inappropriate stuff to our kids. When you have 4 kids, by the third, by the fourth, you're really just sort of forgetting what, these ratings are and what he's now 9, but what he watched at 7, sometimes we'd be halfway through a movie and we'd be like, what's the rating on this? And it's like R-rated. And we'd be like, get out of here. Get out of this living room right now, kid.
Okay, so maybe I should ask somebody else about the Fall Guy.
Yes,
okay,
yes. I think it's not bad. Look, some people would be like, look, he's gyrating against her in his trailer before he goes on. That's deeply inappropriate. I'm like, whatever. A little gyrating never hurt a 9-year-old.
Okay.
That's
right.
a weird statement to make.
No,
I
fine,
didn't mean it like that. Yeah. So those are 2. By the way, speaking of plane rides, Asif, I should mention, and speaking of kids, everything comes together right now. My son took what is a long plane ride for him to Vancouver recently. We went to see the Grey Cup in Vancouver together. I was overjoyed to see him just like really enjoying everything on the trip, but including the plane ride. He was super excited about watching movies on the plane. I don't do that anymore. It's like not enjoy. I'd rather watch from my own laptop or I'd rather listen to podcasts because you're not getting good sound. You're not, it's like the wind of the plane, all that. Now it's different if you're going to Africa, obviously you have to do so, but I don't watch as much on the plane. He's obviously 13 years old. He's loving it. He really loved In Between Two Ferns. And so I asked him as well, any movie recommendations you have for this year? And he said, well, I thought In Between Two Ferns was really funny. I was like, okay. Again, not sure if it's appropriate for a 13-year-old. Probably isn't.
No, I watch it. Maybe my wife watched it because we love Zach Galifianakis in Between Two Ferns. And it was directed by Scott Aukerman from the Comedy Bang Bang podcast. Bang Bang. And of course, You Talking You Two to Me, one of my favorite podcasts. So yeah, it's funny. It's good. If you like those little skits that they do on Funny or Die, then you should watch that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So that's a recommendation from a 13-year-old. And then the final thing on my list here, very contentious. Okay. So I was at a food and film festival called Devour in Wolfville, Nova Scotia in October, which is where I often am in October. That's where I can be found hosting and moderating events. So this was one of the featured films, La Cochina, it's called. And it is, let me give you the exact quote. It was the bear meets something on cocaine. Maybe it was the bear on cocaine, something like that. Oh, the bear on cocaine with a Red Bull chaser. That's how it was described. And you're like, okay, that's a bit much, obviously, but it gets quite insane. And I am in disbelief that it has a 7.3 rating on 7.4 rating on IMDb. It was so contentious in Wolfville. People were like, I don't know what to say about it. It was this. But man, if the idea of art is to evoke emotions and get you talking about it and having conversations about it, man, did this movie ever succeed. Will you enjoy it watching it sort of on your own in your house, in your place, just you? You might come out of it and be like, what the hell just happened? What was that? You watch it in a group, watch it when other people are watching it. The discussions and the conversations afterwards, I just found it so rich as far as what it encouraged us to discuss. And I wasn't sure for an hour and a half. I was like, I don't know if I like this. And then later I was like, no, I've never discussed a movie so passionately with so many people. Mind you, we were at a food and film festival, so people are there. But I think if I'd watched on my own, I'd be desperate to call somebody immediately and be like, what did you just think of that? I think it's worth watching. I think many people agreed that the first 3/4 or even 4/5 was great, and it gets pretty insane. But I will give that a you should watch recommendation. And then tell me what you think. And some of you might not be too pleased with that recommendation, but I'm going to stand by it. I'm looking at it not just from acting, but also from cinematography and directing. Think about all these things together. I think many people watch it and they go, I don't understand the story of something, and therefore it's a bad movie. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as an entire package as much as I can.
Mhm.
That's that. We got Saturday Night, Jim Henson Idea Man, Ricky Stinicky, Fall Guy, if we're including a 13-year-old's recommendation, In Between Two Ferns, and then La Cucina. I will say there are a few movies that I want to watch over the holidays. This is my little list, and I'm certain I will love them. Gladiator 2.
Mm-hmm.
I can't not
Yeah,
watch
yeah.
this, and
I
I
see
want to
that.
watch it in the theaters. Goodrich, Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton is another guy. Anything this guy does, I'm into it.
Mhm.
Give it to me. What do you got? What are you working on this
Mhm.
time? Spaceman with Adam Sandler. I love when he takes on serious roles. I love it so much. He's such an incredible actor to watch in serious roles. If you think back to Uncut Gems and Hustle, anyway, Nickel Boys. Perfect Days, a Japanese film, and then All We
Mhm.
Imagine as Light is something I want to see. It's at TIFF right now. It's a movie out of India, Cannes Festival winner, and it's supposed to be absolutely incredible. I just thought I would mention those all. Those are on my absolutely two watch list over the next 2 weeks.
Okay. They're very good. Very good.
Ah, I got an approval.
I watched less movies than you, it seems, this year. So I'm
Woo!
going to list 4, combination of art house and big, huge blockbusters. 2 of them maybe I've talked about before on the podcast. So the first is Love Lies Bleeding, and I just want to give a shout out to this again. I think we talked about it before on the podcast earlier on this year. This movie came out at the beginning of the year, back in January. It's directed by this woman named Rose Glass, and it stars Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien. So you might remember me, Ali, and the listeners telling you about this. It's about this woman played by Kristen Stewart who works in a gym, like a rundown kind of gym, and she becomes friends with this person who kind of comes into town, who's played by Katie O'Brien, who's a bodybuilder and is like training for a bodybuilding competition. And it takes place in kind of the 80s, I believe, or 90s. And it's their romance and what happens, and they get involved with organized crime through the dad of Kristen Stewart's character, who's played by Ed Harris. And
Ed
I think
Harris.
when we
yeah.
talked about this, you're like, okay, you'll watch anything that has Ed Harris in it. Dave
Same,
Franco's
yeah.
in it, kind of unrecognizable. Jenna Malone does a great job. Just really good, kind of dark film noir kind of thing, but taking place in this world of bodybuilding.
You know who else is in it? Anna Baryshnikov. You know who Anna Baryshnikov is?
I don't. Who's that?
How many Baryshnikovs do you know?
Oh, yeah,
The daughter
okay.
of ballet dancer and actor Mikhail Baryshnikov.
Oh, I didn't know
Mikhail Baryshnikov. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, she was in Manchester by the Sea. I love that movie. Wow, that's Love's a strange way to talk about Manchester by the Sea. It's a devastating movie, but
deeply distressing movie. Yeah.
It's great. So anyway, check this out if you think you like this kind of film noir crime movies. There is a bit of like, I was going to say magic realism, but it's actually more like body horror towards the end of the movie. So you got to be okay with this fantastical element. Anyway, really great performances. Again, makes me just love Kristen Stewart as an actress. And Katie O'Brien was great.
We should mention set in 1989 in a small town in New Mexico. That's the feel, right? It's not like
exactly.
center of New York City, Midtown gym.
Yeah. That was great. Then a couple of blockbusters. So Deadpool and Wolverine, probably the most fun I had in the movies this year. One of the few movies I actually saw in a movie theater this year. Just hilarious, lots of fun. I think it ties in so much things. You have to be willing to go along for this ride, where it callbacks to old movies. But I thought it was a lot of fun and a pretty good performance by Hugh Jackman. It's strange when he tries to include some pathos into this particular version of Wolverine. So that was tons of fun. I really liked it. There's some new controversy online. I guess there's an interview where Ryan Reynolds interviewed Andrew Garfield, and people online are making fun of the fact that, Andrew Garfield apparently, has an amazing role this year, just hit it out of the park for a dramatic role. And why are they having Ryan Reynolds interview him and talk about each other like, he just played Deadpool? And Ryan Reynolds' point was online, I don't know why he's responding to some internet troll, but he was like, these are both difficult things to do. These are both acting, and we're both actors, and which I totally agree with. I mean, I think it's hard to do what Ryan Reynolds does as well as he does, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm sad that he had to respond to that, but I think maybe there's room for some education sometimes, and people can be like, the risk is always like the troll goes, you see the stupid thing that Ryan Reynolds said? Like, they don't have the ability to be like, oh, that's interesting. He replied because this means something to him, and right. So
Yeah, I mean, I would have ignored it, but I think it kind of affects Ryan Reynolds quite a bit, but it's too bad it does. Anyway, that movie made, by the way, $1.3 billion. It's the highest grossing live action movie of the year.
which is exactly how much it needed to make, I'm pretty sure. It feels like
budget was 200 million, but those budgets don't
that's
account
it.
for marketing, which usually they say you have to at least double the budget. So, but it made money for sure. I'm sure there'll be more movies. But anyway, that was a lot of fun. The other one also made a lot of money. We're talking, I think, 1.4 billion. No, 1.69 billion. Let's just go around to 1.7. That's Inside Out 2. That movie is great. And it's hard because Inside Out 1 is such a perfect movie. Inside Out is about how we as parents have to let children deal with sadness. And sadness is an important thing in life. You cannot protect your kids from everything, right? That's what that movie's about. And then Inside Out 2 is all about anxiety. So the new character, Anxiety, is played by Maya Hawke, and of course the main character, Riley, is now becoming a tween teenager, older than she was in the previous movie, and how you deal with anxiety and how anxiety can kind of take over everything in someone's life, right? And how you kind of manage anxiety. Just the fact that you can do that in an animated, colorful movie that takes place in the girl's mind is just so fun. Also, for our Canadian people, hockey plays a huge role in this movie. Tons of fun. Is it as good as Inside Out 1? Probably not, but it's one of my favorite Pixar movies. I thought it was great.
Okay, I'll have to watch it, man. I was reluctant because of exactly what you just said. Inside Out was sort of perfect. It was great. Really, really
Especially
well
if you have anybody in your family who deals with anxiety, which, let's face it, that's most of the population of Earth these days. So I think it has some good messages from that point of view. I thought it was great.
Okay.
So then the last movie I'm going to discuss is the best movie I saw in 2024. It's actually probably one of the best movies I've seen in the past 10 years. And we actually talked about it on our Oscars preview, and Ali had seen it, and I didn't say anything because I hadn't seen it. I saw it like a couple of weeks after the Oscars when I was traveling to Africa. So that's Past Lives. Past Lives, Ali, you told me it was great. And I don't know if I didn't believe you or but it's by Celine Song, her featured directorial debut with Greta Lee, and man, that movie is so good. And if people haven't seen it, don't sleep on it. There's lots of big Hollywood movies that came out that were vying for the Oscar, and this one kind of flew under the radar. I loved every minute of it. It's so difficult to do what they did, which is have a adult conversation, adult in the way that mature people should be having, about what happened, which is in her situation, which is unrequited love, what happens when someone from her past comes back, and how her current husband deals with it. There's no yelling, screaming, melodrama. It's just, but the way you feel, the longing and the sadness, I haven't seen a movie like this in years, man. It was so good.
I'm really glad you mentioned this movie because by this evening, I would have been like, oh, why didn't I mention Past Lives? And I would have felt bad about it. You say fly under the radar. I literally watched this for one reason only, which is that Greta Lee was fantastic in Morning Show. And I'm like, oh, I've never seen her in anything other than Morning Show. Let's see how she is in this movie. And it's just the greatest feeling, just coming across something with no expectations and then finding out how celebrated a film it is. So yeah, I couldn't echo your sentiments any more than that.
And sometimes movies are overhyped, right? And then you're like, yeah, it was okay. But I honestly couldn't believe this movie exists. It got made, and that someone like Celine Song could be so insightful with her writing. A remarkable movie. So if you haven't seen these ones, like I said, people have probably seen or at least heard of the big blockbusters Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine. But check out Love Lives Bleed if you think you'd like it. Again, there is some raciness in it. There is violence a lot. There's the body horror, so you have to be okay with those things. Don't watch it with your kids. But Past Lives, for sure. Past Lives you can watch with your kids. There's some language, but I just think they might be a bit bored by it because they may not really understand what that's all about.
They don't know love, these kids.
I have a bunch of things I'm trying to see before the end of the year, beginning of next year. Some of the ones you said. Beetlejuice 2 I still have to see. I still want to see Gladiator 2, as you said. Moana 2, Venom 3. These are all on my list. But one that I want to see is The Substance. Have you heard about this movie? It's again
No.
kind of a body horror movie about a woman who's trying to like stay young, and that's all I kind of know about it. But it's Demi Moore who plays this woman who's
Okay.
trying to capture her youthful looks and what happens. And that's my understanding of the movie. Apparently, it's a really good, pretty like it is a horror kind of movie. But people are saying Demi Moore should be nominated for an Oscar for it. So that's kind of
Wow.
the ones that are on my list.
Wow. Okay. Great.
Why don't we move on to television?
Yeah. So we might have some overlap here. I'm not sure, but I kept it small because it actually was small. Again, I was like, I wasted some time on television, and there were some that were decent. The English teacher was good, but should it be in my like sort of top 5 of the year? I don't think so. I think Hacks season 3 is definitely pretty special television. I really, really enjoyed that. We've talked about Hacks on this show. You can go to our archives and check that out. A big fan of that show. The Regime, I thought was quite good, but also pretty weird.
What's that, Ellie? I don't even know that show. Can you just tell us 2 lines about it? Two lines.
So again, I know I say this very often, but there's certain actors that whatever they do, I'm in. And Kate Winslet is one of them. And Kate Winslet does weird really well. You wouldn't think so. But she's really good. If you watched, like, I think it was called Mare, right? Mare, she was a different...
Mare of Easttown.
Mare of Easttown. It was more serious. This is like really weird and incredible at the same time. So it's referred to as a political satire miniseries. It's in this Central European country. I can't even remember the name. It's like a made-up country. And she is the dictator ruling over this fictitious country, and she does it in a very authoritarian but hilarious way. She becomes more and more paranoid and unstable as the episodes grow, as the season grows. And I think I just loved it to watch Kate Winslet be the master of her craft. I think that was the bottom line on this one. That's why I really liked it. Next, if this is not on your list, I will be shocked. The Penguin, and I still have to watch the final episode.
Oh, wow.
Penguin compelling doesn't even come close. It's just like, God help you if you try to come and disturb me while I'm watching this show. It is so all engrossing because of the acting and the storytelling. And I don't know if cinematography is the right word for all the people who are sort of doing the lighting and staging and sets, but all of those things are amazing on this show.
Production design, yeah.
Production design is the words I'm looking for. 3 Body Problem, that was something we talked about on the show as well. That was early on in 2024. I found that show also incredibly compelling. I needed a cigarette after every episode. I was like, whew, let me just digest that. Like, that show really did something to me. And it was the acting, but also the incredible, again, production design on that one too was amazing. And then I'm going to give a little shout out to an HBO show that we have not talked about here, but Somebody Somewhere, which is now, it's in its 3rd season, and I think it's going 3rd and final season. It's a show with Bridget Everett, and Bridget Everett, we have not talked about her, one of the most ridiculously hysterical people I've ever seen on stage. What she does on stage is like unlike anybody else. I was begrudgingly going to a female dirty show at Just for Laughs many years ago. It was like The Nasty Girls or something like this, it was called. They'd have the dirty shows, and I don't go to the men or the women dirty shows. That's not really my thing. I don't have the same appreciation for that as I once did. So I'm taken by my friend Iman. Come and see it. It's amazing. Natasha Leggero and this person, Amy Schumer, and the women who've gone on to be just these incredible killers in comedy. They were just coming up at the time. And the headliner was somebody I'd never heard of, Bridget Everett. Man, so good, so entertaining, so talented, an incredible voice, hilariously filthy. Her whole conceit is that she's wasted the entire time she's on stage. And it's ridiculously funny. And this show is none of that. This is really like somebody who's just stuck in neutral, trying to figure out life, trying to figure out what she's doing here, what matters. And it's a dramedy, but it is beautifully done. And I think because I know what Bridget Everett's stage persona is, to see this, it's sort of like Zach Galifianakis when I saw Baskets. I was like, oh man, this man has some incredible range. So if you like Baskets, I would definitely recommend Somebody Somewhere on HBO.
You know, the first time I heard about this show was yesterday as I was
What?
preparing for our podcast, because I was looking up, I'm like, oh, what did the critics say was the best show of 2024? And I swear every single critics list had this as the number one show.
Okay. Number one.
Yes.
Oh.
And I'll tell you why. It has, the first season has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. The second season has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the third season has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's insane.
So this show, which I never heard of, but now I'm sure I have to check out based on your recommendation.
I'm very happy to hear that, because I worry a little bit that I love this show because of what I know about Bridget Everett, and I'm thinking about her range from insane, larger than life comedian on stage to this, but it's good to know that the show just, without any background, but I would say after you watch an episode of Somebody Somewhere, do watch some of her stand up.
Okay. All right. So that's on my list, added to my list.
I had one that I want to watch, just one. It's The Diplomat. I don't know if you know it.
Everybody's talking about The Diplomat.
Yeah. And I feel like what I've heard in the chitter chatter is like, oh man, I think I would really like that. It reminds me of Designated Survivor a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So that's on my list. Lots of people talking about it. Okay, so I'll go through my list, a few more than yours. Some of them we've talked about on the show before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. So one of them, Three Body Problem for sure, but you can go back to our archives, listen to that episode. Love that show. Can't wait for the second season. Then there is kind of like the three kind of fantasy comic book kind of shows that, again, people have heard me praise these a lot on the podcast. It's The Boys, House of the Dragon, and Invincible. Out of all these, probably House of the Dragon was the most disappointing. I wasn't as disappointed as other people were, and probably the best out of them was Invincible. Again, a voice cast as Stephen Ewan.
Tell me what Invincible is about again. I don't actually...
So, yeah, Invincible is an animated series based on a comic book by Robert Kirkman. He created The Walking Dead. It has Stephen Ewan, J.K. Simmons, Sandra Oh. I mean, it's a powerhouse cast. Walter Goggins, like, the cast is amazing. And basically, I probably shouldn't spoil it for people, but it's a bit of a twist on, Superman coming to Earth, and being the savior of Earth. It's a bit of a twist on that. And Invincible plays the son of this famous superhero. So it's a lot of fun. It's great. It's well done. Like I said, The Boys kind of dropped in quality a bit this season. I still loved it. House of the Dragon dropped a bit in quality, but I still loved it. So you check out those for the genre kind of picks for me. Then a couple comedies, actually a lot of comedies on mine. So The After Party Season 2. I don't know if we talked about The After Party last year, but tons of fun. So this is created by Christopher Miller. So it's Christopher Miller and Phil Lord, who did 21 Jump Street, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, tons of movies, the Spider-Man movies. They're the producers of those, the animated ones. So it's a lot of fun. And basically the idea is it's an after party where a murder occurs. That was the plot of season 1. And people at the party and a police detective are trying to solve the murder, but every episode acts like a different genre type movie. So one is a romantic comedy, one's a police thriller, and they go forward like that. So in the second season, there's another murder at an after party and what happens during that. So it's a ton of fun. The fourth episode of the series is totally making fun of Wes Anderson movies. The way they're shot, it's done really well. It's a great parody. And it made me realize one thing. I hate Wes Anderson movies, I've decided.
No way.
Yeah, I just find it so... Because this brought out all the things that annoy me so much. I honestly don't watch his movies anymore because I just find them so annoying. I would probably I'll probably try The Fantastic Mr. Fox because I never saw that. And, it's stop motion animation. That might be more my thing. But I was thinking back, I'm like, other than Bottle Rocket, which was his first movie, which I did like, I'm like, I don't even think I liked Rushmore. Everybody talks about Rushmore. I'm like, I remember seeing it in the movie theater and all my friends like it. I'm like, what is this? I pretended I liked it, but no.
I pretended I liked it. Oh my God.
So that's The After Party. Another comedy that's ending this season is What We Do in the Shadows. It's almost done. There's a few more weeks left and then it's going to be finished. I mean, this is a mockumentary about vampires living in Staten Island. It's so ridiculous. It's based on a Taika Waititi movie that he wrote with Jermaine Clement. I've watched the movie and I've watched the show. I think the show's funnier. Just such great humor in it. Matt Berry plays one of the vampires, and you probably know, if you don't know who he is, you know his voice. In Canada, he was the voice for the Movember and Hockey Night in Canada kind of collaboration that you probably heard on the radio and on TV. He's a very distinct British accent, and the way he pronounces things is hilarious. Anyway, great show. If you guys have never seen it, it'll be done in a couple of weeks, and then you could just binge the whole thing afterwards. This was also the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Again, Larry David, just, it's a ridiculous show. I don't think, what's the word? Misanthropy, right? Is that the word?
Sure. Misanthropic is definitely who he is.
Is what he is. I don't even know if anybody could do this anymore. I don't know if people have the patience for this show, but it's been on for so long. It was great. The plot this time was that, he accidentally gave water to a woman waiting in line in Georgia, I believe, to vote. And you can't do that. And so they were kind of making a political statement about this and what happens. And, Bruce Springsteen's in it. He calls Larry a hero, and then hijinks ensue. Anyway, tons of fun. I'll miss it. Richard Lewis's last major role was in this season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. So a bit of sadness as well, but certainly there's no sadness in this show. It's bitter till the end, but that was a lot of fun.
My 13-year-old is watching it now, and I was like, dude, 2 episodes at a time. That's it.
Don't
get more than that. I'm telling you. He goes, why? I go, something will happen to you. I swear to God, you will just...
Something will break inside you.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Couple more things. X-Men 97 is another animated series. There was an X-Men animated series in the 90s, and this is basically taking place right afterwards. So they start off using this animated style from the 90s and slowly modernize it. It's just really well done. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. If you like X-Men, it was one of the best depictions of the X-Men. And then there's some serious stakes. People die, and it's not terribly violent, and there's nothing offensive really in it. There's a, romance scene and stuff like that. But I thought it was really well done. That's on Disney+. Then the 2 best series I saw this year, I finished recently. One is The Penguin, as you said. I was so surprised by this, Ali. It's a comic book movie, but really, you don't have to know anything about comic books, and you don't have to have watched the most recent Batman movie. It's irrelevant to the story, and it's all about this person played by Colin Farrell, who's a low-level mob boss who's trying to move his way up, and there's tons of double crosses, triple crosses. The suspense at the end of every episode reminds me of Breaking Bad, where you're just like, how are they going to get out of this crazy situation, and then they try and do it. I'm not saying it's as good as Breaking Bad, but the performance by Colin Farrell, he 100% deserves the Emmy, because you forget that it's Colin Farrell. It's unrecognizable because of the makeup he's wearing, but the accent he does, it's just really well done. And what I really liked, again, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers, but sometimes, the main characters of a show are really secretly the heroes or anti-heroes. I'm not sure that's quite what happened in this show. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. Christina Milioti is in it as well. She's great. Just tons of fun. There's the young kid who's in it, whose name I'm forgetting there, Ali, who plays Victor, his kind of assistant. A great performance by that kid as well. He's clearly a star. His name is Renzi Feliz. You got Clancy Brown. Anyway, great show. I highly recommend it if you like the crime drama type shows. You'll like it. Don't have to like comic book movies. And then, Ali, the best show I've seen this year, I just finished it, and it's A Man on the Inside, which is on Netflix.
We've just watched 3 episodes, my wife and I, enjoying it quite a bit. I didn't put it on my list because I'm like, I don't know where this is going to go.
Yeah, you have to finish it, I think, first. So those of you who haven't seen it, I think lots of people are watching it. Ted Danson plays an elderly man whose wife died about a year before the events of the series, who had Alzheimer's dementia. And what's going on with his life, his connection with his daughter, and then he gets, through a series of circumstances, get hired by a private investigator to investigate something being stolen in a retirement home. So he goes undercover in the retirement home to try and solve the crime. But as I've talked about before, the best shows and movies are really about something else, because that's what it's about, but it's about what it's like being an elderly person. the loneliness, the sadness when your friends pass away, you and your partner pass away, about dementia and how that affects people. And the fact that you can make a show like this. So it was created by Micah Schur, who, was one of the creators of Parks and Recreation, also created The Good Place, two of my favorite shows from the past 20 years. And really, it's a miracle that this show could have been created, focusing on elderly people. That's the majority of the cast, and the issues that they're dealing with. More like, obviously, we think about that because we have parents who are aging, but even Ollie, you and I hate to break it to you, we're aging as well. Like, this is going to be us in like a decade, or not a decade. It's going to be us in like 20 or 30 years. So, you have to think about that as well. Anyway, I cannot recommend the show enough. There is going to be a second season. If you haven't checked it out, great thing to watch over the holidays. I actually watched it with my 17-year-old daughter, and she loved it. So if you think, oh, kids won't like it, no, she loved every minute of it. I mean, it was sad when she's like, oh my God, that's like my grandfather, but it was good. And you will cry during it, 100% for sure. That's my recommendation.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to send me that list. I think that's good.
Okay,
it's very good
for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, Ali, I have music and one book, and you have more books. So why don't you do your books, and then I'll
sure.
tidy up.
Well, I also want to say a couple of comedy specials I'm looking forward to watching is Anthony Jeselnik, Bones and All. Very dark, very dark, but I'm hearing good things.
Very dark. Let's watch that.
Very dark. He's very dark. How dark is he? He's very dark. Yes.
We love the darkness.
We love the darkness.
Let's watch that and talk about it on a episode in the new year.
Let's do that.
I've been meaning to get into his comedy, and I know this special just came out. I'm like, you know what? I should just do a deep dive and watch this. So let's do that.
Jim Gaffigan has a special called The Skinny. Do you know why it's called The Skinny?
No.
Because he is on a certain drug that we have talked about on this special, I believe. He doesn't mention it in his, I think he's on the Ozempic. So it's a special called The Skinny. It's on Hulu, unfortunately, so we might have to find some less than legal way of finding it. But what are you going to do? Okay. Looking forward to watching Adam Sandler. Love you. There's something about him on stage. And I think I don't think you would, I would recommend Hassan Minhaj, Off With His Head.
No, I would too. In the end, I liked it. I recommended it to someone the other day.
You did? Oh, look at you. I would recommend Norm Macdonald, Nothing Special. I thought that touched me. And I know that didn't come out in 2024, but this is the time we were talking about. Yep. And then Rachel Feinstein, I don't know if you know her. She's a Jewish woman married to, I think he's Italian. He might as well. He's New Jersey. You know what I mean? He's a firefighter. Her jokes about him, he gave her an hour by just being a complete knob, but also being a hero. And it's this problem of when you're married to a guy who, for Mother's Day, gives you a $50 Amazon gift certificate and thinks that was a good gift. What? You always shop at Amazon. I don't understand. But also is regarded as a hero. Like when you are in the middle of arguments on the street, people will walk by and be like, excuse me, thank you for your service. And it's like, we're arguing right now, not now. He doesn't need a big head right now. It's very funny. And her whole perspective, being married to this dude and what it means. Personally speaking, she is very connected with firefighters, organizations, and campaigning for them, financially and helping them as much as possible. But as she said, like in an interview recently with Mike Birbiglia, there's a loneliness that comes with being one of these wives, like a spouse of a firefighter can be very insular, very lonely. There's a part of like the risk that your partner is taking, typically your husband is taking. There's a part like how long they're gone. And they're going to live in basically a fraternity for a couple of days or weeks sometimes. That's what they're doing. They're going to a frat house. That's the fire station. It becomes, a little bit challenging, but also like everybody views your husband as a hero. So I don't know. I found it very, very entertaining, but I know her stuff from previously as well. And I thought this was like really like her greatest work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to talk about books, huh?
Yeah, I want to talk about you talking about books.
Yeah. So you got one, so we'll come to you. That's big. Your one book. My first book, buddy. So here's the thing. I read a lot of books this year. I was guest hosting on a show called The Next Chapter on CBC Radio. You can, if you are a big fan of literature, you can go back, listen to The Next Chapter on CBC. You can also listen to Canada Reads or watch Canada Reads online. These are really truly some of the best books. And so it's almost unfair for me to pick a few, but I'm picking them with a few things in mind. So number one, I'm picking this in mind for you, Asif, because when I read this, I thought of you. I thought of us, as I don't fashion myself to be much of a science fiction geek anymore. But Robert J. Sawyer, award-winning author, is a guy who is regarded as a book for people who don't feel like they're super into science fiction. I read this, it's called The Downloaded, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit. It's all conversations. The entire book is conversation with astronauts on this station. And people's minds have been uploaded onto a quantum computer in Waterloo, Ontario, and they're talking with them. It's crazy. Like on paper, I'm like, no, this clearly doesn't work. But I got to interview this guy. I should read it. It was incredible. This guy's writing and this guy's mind is amazing. And I think Robert J. Sawyer, probably anything by him is worth reading. This is how I was introduced to him, and I really, really liked it. This next book, these next two are for people who are big fans of literature, I would say, and reading and the use of language. One is called The Other Valley, Scott Alexander Howard. I got to interview him out of Vancouver. His writing is also incredible and is a little bit of like a sci-fi vibe there too. It reminds me of like M. Night Shyamalan. Shyamalan?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
I'm in the space.
I'm in
the space. I'm sorry, M. Night. I wish I could pronounce that correctly. It reminds me of that type of energy of these books. Very, very interesting. And so every word is chosen perfectly. So economical. And really, really well written. It's called The Other Valley, Scott Alexander Howard. Rage the Night by Donna Morrissey. She's a best-selling author out of Newfoundland. Her writing style is different. She's a Newfoundlander. She's a great storyteller. You get a lot of words, but they're all fantastic also. Great choice of words. And again, these are books like, this is the beauty of literature. This is based on a real story about a tragedy that happened in Newfoundland in 1949. On the seas, on the ice, in the waters. I mean, this is not where Ali Hassan lives. I don't live in 1914 maritime lore. And yet this is the beauty of literature. When somebody writes well, it just grabs you in and you're like, man, this is absolutely phenomenal that I'm so engrossed by a book that has nothing to do with me. It's a reminder that you don't need to see yourself in anything, right? It's extend yourself. It is not a mirror. It is art. And this was just a beautiful piece of work. So this next book, full disclosure here, I am friends with the author. My wife grew up with the drummer of Wide Mouth Mason. His name is Safi. Safi married this woman, Aram Shazia Hassan. And Aram wrote this book, debut novel, beautiful piece of work based on the work that she did in the world of charity, basically United Nations type of charitable organizations across the world. And I think you would also really, really like this book. It is a very compelling story, completely fictitious, set in a country, fictitious country. You get the feeling that it might be Haiti. And I know that she worked a lot in Haiti and in Africa. And it also outlines the dilemmas of working in these charitable organizations. Who is the charity going to? Who determines who gets that charity? All these kind of things. Some sticky situations. Okay, next up, something I've never read before, which is crime. And I had to interview this author. Her name is Asma Zahanat Khan. And Asma Zahanat Khan has written Detective Inaya Rahman crime series. I think she has 3 books in this series. So I hadn't read the first one. I got to read the second one. I'm like, am I going to understand? This is a book called Blood Betrayal. Dude, I'm like, I guess I like crime. I had no idea. This blew my mind how amazing. It was really like watching a crime series. It was like watching it unfold in your mind. Blood Betrayal is the name of the book. The book that was before it was Blackwater Falls, which is a community in Colorado. She's based out of Colorado, writes about this world. Amazing. And then 3 more books. I'll give you them very quickly. M.G. Vasanji, Everything There Is.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it's about physics. For God's sake, Asif, I could not have worked harder and gotten anything higher than a 50 in physics. I don't know a goddamn thing about physics, but I really, really like this book about this physics professor. and his struggles in the world. I really, just so well written. I think I've talked about this book last year. I'm going to mention it again anyway. A History of Burning, Janika Oza. This is such an incredible novel spanning decades and generations and continents, starting in India, moving to Africa, ending in Canada, multiple generations of families. And it's really like, I cannot believe that this has not been picked for Canada Reads or for other Giller nominated. I mean, this should be way higher than it is. I think it just has to have the right champion backing it, and it's going to go places. And finally, last book, The Long Road Home on Blackness and Belonging. This was written last year in 2023, but Deborah Thompson's book is worth, you probably should read this every 2 years. It is about the intricate, intimate web of how racism slips into places that you would not even think about. It is a heavy book. It also has a lot of joy. It talks a lot about community building, but with Trump coming back into power right now, that's what 2025 has for us. And so I think it is such an important book to read. I'll let people look this up, see if it's for them. I would recommend it to anybody. Long Road Home on Blackness and Belonging. It's Deborah Thompson's book. And as I said, I could have chosen 15 more, but these are ones that really stuck out. And I think some of them are important as they are escapism.
Well, as usual, you read a ton of books and I barely read any. So I said I'd do one book and one album from this past year. So the book that I read, which actually came out several years ago, is Bono's book, Surrender. Oh, yeah. Which basically each chapter, there's 40 chapters, each chapter, begins with a song and some lyrics from 40 of his songs. And then they he discusses a part of his life. Doesn't have to necessarily be in sequential order. Sometimes he jumps around. I was surprised, I think he embraces his... People think he's a bit pompous, and I think he kind of embraces that. It was quite fascinating reading about, I almost said listening, because it's like he's just talking to you. I think the audiobook would be amazing to listen to. And just hearing about their lives growing up in Ireland, all the people from U2, how they were really very religious growing up, and how some of that religion still stays with them, meeting his wife, and then kind of the success that U2 had. But it's the stuff that everybody knows about the songs and the success, but my favorite part is at the end of the book where he's talking about, the philanthropy that he does.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to share that story, Condoleezza Rice and all that. You would share that with me.
So it's an amazing story. So basically, he was a big proponent. We're talking in the early 2000s about aid for Africa, especially for the HIV epidemic there. And he agreed to meet with George Bush. This is after 2001. George Bush says, he's going to put money into this AIDS relief. Eventually, the plan was going to be $100 billion. So a huge amount.
Is that with an M or a B?
With a B.
Oh, my God.
He was obviously interested in this. And they were going to have this big kind of press conference. And they basically said, the Bush administration said, you have to appear on stage with George Bush. And at first, Bono was like, there's no way. So Condoleezza Rice met with him and said, you have to do this. And he's like, I can't do this. Like, everybody who's part of his charity, including huge heavy hitters like George Soros, was like, you cannot do this. You cannot appear on stage on him. Like, you're compromising our principles. The members of his band hated it. But she's like, it was like a handshake deal. Like, they could have gone back on it. And Bono said, sometimes you just have to trust your enemy. And he disagreed with the war in Iraq heavily, the response after 9/11 from the Bush administration. But he's like, this is for the greater good. And this is very interesting because this is kind of the way he views looking at it. He considers himself in what's called the compromise middle. So he's a pragmatist, right? He's like, to get things done, you have to, what he says, break bread with the enemy. And that is very distasteful to a lot of people, but he's like, that's how you move things forward. And it's a very interesting way of thinking about the world, especially the world we live in now. And I think some people have criticized him, but I think it's a very interesting way of looking at things. And the Point is that he did get it done. Bush did commit to that. There were some issues with, was it all the money that was promised? And then they kind of went back and forth a bit. There was some animosity, but in the end, things worked out. And Bono, because he took a risk, right, of trusting people, even the people who you may be inclined to distrust. So that was one of the best parts of the book. And so I encourage people to check it out if they think they'd like it. I definitely had a better appreciation, especially for some of these things.
Yeah, I remember that story well. It's so illustrative about what is required when you're bargaining. You don't get something for nothing.
Exactly.
You don't get something for nothing. And what you have to give up, there might be thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who don't agree with, but it's very interesting. And yeah, not everybody's able to do it, certainly. But look what happens when he did. He got that 100 billion. Right? That's the...
Yeah. And he, not in the book, but in he obviously talks about Ireland and the troubles in the book, but he's like, this is what the Irish people had to do, to sit down with people they hate in order to get peace in Ireland. Now there's a generation of Irish kids who have no idea about what Ireland went through, and so, which is amazing, so I think he sees that. I think being Irish helps in that respect. So anyway, check that out if you think you'd like it. Like I said, there is the pomposity, yeah, pomposity is a word. The white savior. He talks about all those things. He's not ignorant of the fact that he is viewed like this. So anyway, that was a lot of fun in terms of a read. And then the last thing I'll talk about is one album. I hinted at this on a previous podcast. There is a lot of talk about Pearl Jam's latest album, Dark Matter, being a return to form, and this is the best album they've released in years. And to me, I was like, yeah, I've heard that a million times. Then I check out the new Pearl Jam album, and it's not good. And so I haven't bought an album of theirs in like 20 years, right? But my friend Dougal texted me. He's like, you should really check this album out. It's awesome. And I said, I don't know. So I waited a couple months. Then I downloaded it on Apple Music and listened to it. I'm like, this album is so great.
Does it slap?
It slaps. It's a Stone Cold classic, as I like to say.
Yeah.
It is produced by Andrew Watt. And Andrew Watt is a huge Pearl Jam fan. I grew up a big fan of them. But you might know him from some of his other hits that he has produced for the likes of Justin Bieber, Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez, he did It Ain't Me. He did Wolves by Selena Gomez. He did a bunch of stuff for 5 Seconds of Summer, Post Malone, Blink-182. The songs that you guys have probably heard from him. He did Midnight Sky by Miley Cyrus. He did Peaches for Justin Bieber. So he's a pop music producer.
Super pop. Yeah, I thought you were going to say Midnight Oil. I'm like, okay, this goes a little heavier rocking, but no, very poppy.
But he did Eddie Vedder's last solo album, and Eddie Vedder's like, I think you should come and work with Pearl Jam. And so he's like, I want the sound of when I go to your concerts. Everybody's in a room. We're going to all play together. What Pearl Jam used to do is they would write all their songs and parts on their own, and then they kind of come together, and then they just record them. So it was very kind of efficient. He's like, no, like, don't do that by yourself. Let's work on these together. So it sounds like exciting. It's very vibrant. It's just a great album. I don't know what to tell you. Every song is good. You can listen to the whole thing all the way through. Is it poppy? It's not poppy in the way that, say, Justin Bieber's Peaches is, but all the songs have hooks. They're catchy. Really worth checking out. So I highly suggest people, if you've liked Pearl Jam in the past, and especially if you kind of fallen out with them, or they've fallen out of your favor, or wherever the term is, then definitely check it out. Have I convinced you, Ollie?
No, there's no time for music. I don't know how to.
What about when you drive in a car?
Podcast, baby! I can't even recommend a podcast this year because I'm too busy trying to catch up on all these podcasts that have been in my podcast list for the last 3-4 years.
Okay, but what about when you're doing work?
Yes.
Can you listen to music when you do work?
It's better if it's instrumental. Sometimes
you're one of those instrumental
take
people.
Me away, Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. That's okay.
I don't know. When you jam it in your house, when I come over to visit you and you jam it.
Oh, there we go.
Do you have the full speaker system in the home going?
I have a speaker.
One speaker. Okay.
That's our episode for today. Let us know what you guys thought. That's our year-end review for 2024. Let us know what you guys thought about our entertainment choices. Did we miss anything? Again, Ollie and I just went through our Netflix list and best of list. Maybe we missed something that either we saw or you saw that we missed. Let us know. drvcomedian@gmail.com, drvcomedian Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are everywhere. One day of Blue Sky as well.
Still calling it Twitter, huh?
Oh, I'm never calling it X. Elon Musk. Come on, idiot. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no, we're in trouble now.
So, Ali, what do you got going on? I don't know, December 31st?
Well, great question. Happy to report I am co-hosting the CBC television New Year's Eve thing, the whole show. It's going to be Ian Hannah-Mansing and I from Vancouver. We'll be flipping to Toronto. We'll be flipping to Newfoundland. We're flipping across. So I have a 7-hour shift that night from Vancouver, going to musicians and different cities and anchors. But it's Ian and I at the helm of the show, and I couldn't be more excited about it.
It's very exciting. While Ali is busy doing that, we're going to be off for 2 weeks. So no episodes December 27th and January 3rd, but we'll be back January 10th in the new year for all new episodes of Doctor versus Comedian. But...
What? Wait, hold on. Before you butt it.
Okay.
And also, you didn't even say one medical thing in the last hour. What are you talking about? I wanted to wish everybody a very safe, very happy new year. The idea of this show also, yes, it's a recap on the year, but it's not meant to make anybody feel like, this is what you missed. Dum-dum, huh? Why don't you do this? It's not at all like that. It's more, I think things like this all the time.
Oh, no. So it's more to what you can look forward to over the holidays.
That's what I would hope.
When you have some downtime and some books, movies, TV shows, maybe that album if you guys want to check it out, and some of those comedy specials too. But Ali, listen, I just got to say one thing before we go. Is that okay?
No.
Just remember that although I'm a doctor, medical issues are talked about for your interest and information only, and they're not medical advice. Please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Thanks for listening, and Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
Thank you.